Hello, and welcome to the Robert A. Kalka Metropolitan Skyport Executive Briefing. We are Finalist 14, and we'd like to thank you today for giving us your time. For our agenda, we're going to be starting off, my apologies, we're going to be starting off with our introductions, and then we'll be following that with our remediation summary. This is going to cover our, my apologies, this is going to be covering our objectives, risk, and specialized threats to RAKMS. Following this, we're going to be going over our compliance evaluation as well as our strategic recommendations before tying everything together with our conclusion. So, my name is Dylan, and I'm the manager for Finalist 14. I'm here with our senior consultants, Derek, Gabriel, as well as consultants, Tanai, Marshall, and Maxwell. Moving into our reassessment summary, we discovered a total of 33 vulnerabilities. This included 20 new vulnerabilities which were previously not found during our initial assessment back in November. This places RAKMS at a critical risk of compromise. In addition to this, we discovered these results amounted to over 130 regulation violations, as well as the potential for over 100 employees having their personal data disclosed.
Now, moving on with the reassessment summary, here are the objectives of the engagement. We have assessed the general security of RAKMS's internal infrastructure as well as the AWS environment. We ensured that all testing performed was strategic, safe, and with explicit approval. We've also tested the awareness of staff against social engineering tactics. Lastly, we verified the company's compliance against compliance frameworks such as CSA and FAA. Now, regarding the scope of the engagement, we have assessed exclusively but thoroughly the network that was given to us by RAKMS, that being the corporate, tram, guest, and user networks, in addition to the AWS infrastructure. We use a custom heuristic framework which takes into account likelihood and impact to measure the amount of risk that RAKMS is subject to. Likelihood meaning how easy it is for an attacker to perform an exploit, and impact meaning how easy or how much damage an attacker is able to cause.
All right, let's jump into the trends that we saw within the RAKMS organization. Here we see the first trend. Finalist 14 found many new vulnerabilities uniquely in the reassessment. However, we would like to stress that while we did find many vulnerabilities this past weekend, we believe that many of these vulnerabilities have been latent in the RAKMS organization for quite a while. What this means is that RAKMS is not somehow less secure than it was during our November assessment, but that there is an opportunity for growth and improvement of its security posture. Some other key trends that we noticed were a couple categories of vulnerabilities that we tended to see over and over again. First category was improperly patched systems. What this means is that systems that were that had hotfixes applied, temporary fixes applied, but had not been properly and fully updated to newer versions. The second category is access control misconfigurations. This means that there were each instances of vulnerabilities that were caused by misconfigurations to access controls across different systems and different networks. And the last category was 3 internal tools that were left publicly facing when they should not have been. All of these categories tell the same story, that RAKMS needs to bake in security into its organizational processes and be more thorough. Now let's jump into the last trend. This represents the vulnerabilities that we discovered during the November assessment. During that assessment, we identified 3 critical assets that were exposed and we would like to see have been remediated by the time of the reassessment. As we look at this data over time, we see that only 2 of these vulnerabilities from the initial assessment in November were identified as being remediated using proper security controls, and only 1 of those assets have been adequately secured. Ultimately, we believe that these trends show that RAKMS has a residual risk that is largely similar to what it faced during the November assessment.
Let's talk about some specialized threats. Throughout the duration of the engagement, RKMS contacted us about looking into specific threats. We conducted investigations on 2 RF signals. We conducted an investigation on the first RF signal and determined with high confidence that this is a benign signal. We were able to detect the second RF signal, but were unable to identify it. Moving on, RAKMS asked us to perform a social engineering. RAKMS asked us to perform a social engineering engagement. We completed 1 phishing assessment in the form of calling the help desk as a new user attempting to exfiltrate or extract information. We completed 1 phishing assessment in the form of a malicious Word document sent as a performance review, hoping that a user would open it. Ultimately, both the phishing and phishing assessment showed the same story. They showed that 0 RAKMS employees were found to be susceptible to social engineering.
Next, we will be talking about compliance. We assessed RAKMS on 2 different compliance frameworks. First, the FAA AIP grant, to ensure that any projects that RAKMS intends on being funded in part with the AIP grant can be handled in a quick and efficient manner. And second, the TSA cybersecurity requirements, to ensure the public and national security of RAKMS. Regarding the FAA grant, we discovered that RAKMS may not be following the cybersecurity requirements necessary to receive AIP grant money, potentially leading to a loss of funding from this grant of between $10,000 to $500,000. We determined this due to the presence of non-remediated vulnerabilities, which negatively impact the likelihood of RAKMS receiving the AIP grant. And second, for TSA, we determined RAKMS to have 120 TSA violations, leading to estimated fines of $1.7 million to $4.5 million. The majority of these violations stem from the presence of overly permissive users, along with unpatched systems.
Before moving on to our recommendations, we'd like to highlight a few key strengths that we found in RAKMS's network during our engagement. First off, social engineering awareness. RAKMS had a strong social engineering awareness posture that protected from both our phishing and phishing campaigns. Next, network segmentation. RAKMS's network segmentation protects its perimeter from external threats. Lastly, logging and monitoring. RAKMS's security team was fast to respond and step in whenever a suspicious threat occurred. Moving on to recommendations. The first area of improvement are access controls. Once the firewall was let down, the access controls were weakened, and moving on to excessive privileges. There are numerous excessive privileges users in the RAKMS environment. Lastly, fully updating systems. There were RAKMS used mitigations instead of properly updating and patching their systems.
To conclude, RAKMS has made good progress since the previous engagement this past November. However, security is an ever-evolving path, and security is a journey. Thus, it is important that this progress is continued. Further, RAKMS demonstrated good social awareness, or social engineering awareness. However, RAKMS needs to bake in security. This is critical if it is to maintain a mature and robust security posture. With that being said,